Et bonjour classe de français 3. Today, you can probably tell from the page, we're taking notes. So, we'll be doing this in class, but if you wanted to follow along, get a head start. Piece of paper, fold it into fourths, and let's begin. Okay, très bien. Class, like I said, we will be going over these in class, but sometimes it's nice to be able to take notes on your own, in your own time, at your own pace, and absorb what we're learning because we're learning some grammar today. We are talking about pronouns, direct and indirect object pronouns. What could be more exciting? Not much, I tell you. The first thing that I'd like you to do is take your piece of paper, fold it into fourths. So fold it like a hamburger, fold it like a hamburger again, and then you'll have 4 squares. I call these 4 square notes because there are 4 main points we're going to make today. And actually today we're only going to fill in 3. The 4th we will do some practice in class. So let's start with just the idea that we're talking about today, object pronouns. And fair warning, my handwriting is not so great. I'm using this little tablet. It's kind of slippery. I feel like my handwriting isn't as good as it could be, but hopefully you can still follow along. So the title of this, object pronouns. See what I mean? Ooh, it's not the best. What is an object pronoun? What does it do? How do you use it? The first thing we need to know is that object pronouns replace a noun. It's like a noun gone pro. So write that down. Object pronouns replace a noun. In fact, these replace the object of the sentence. So that's another thing to keep in mind. That's why they're called object pronouns. Object of the sentence. I'm sure your handwriting is better than mine. Here are some sample sentences in French so we can talk about the subject, the verb, and the object. Okay? So first one, very simple. Harkening back to your days in French 1, je regarde la télé. Okay, what's the subject of the sentence? The subject is je, because je is the one doing the verb. Don't get the subject and the topic of the sentence confused. Sometimes people will say, well, the subject of the sentence is watching TV. That's what the sentence is about. That's the topic of the sentence. But the subject is a very specific grammatical term that means the thing that does the verb. So je is regarding. Je is the subject, regard is the verb, which means la télé is the object. And the object of the sentence is basically the thing that gets verbed. So, je regarde, what am I watching? La télé. Je regarde la télé. La télé is the object. Another example. Il mange. Il mange les carottes. He's eating the carrots. So what's the subject? Il. Il is doing the verb. The verb is mange. And what is he eating? Les carottes. That's the object, the thing that's getting eaten, the thing that's getting verbed. Voilà. How about one more? Nous faisons le travail. We are doing the work. Yes, we are, class. Nous faisons le travail. We are the subject, nous. The verb is faisons, are doing, and the object is le travail. So, what does an object pronoun do? It takes this object and replaces it with a shorter word. It makes your language much more efficient. We do it all the time in English. Every language has this way of making sentences shorter, making communication more efficient. Well, what does it look like? En français, there's one more rule that you need to write down. So we've already talked about how object pronouns replace the noun Where do they go in the sentence when you replace that noun, when you replace that object? Class, object pronouns go before the verb. This is key. I want you to memorize this phrase and use it all the time. Before the verb. Object pronouns go before. I'm making it in all caps because it is très important. Before the verb. Okay? What does that look like? Well, take our first sentence. Je regarde la télé is going to become je la regarde. The object pronoun is la, and I have placed it before the verb. Je la regarde. Il mange les carottes. Il les mange. The object pronoun is les. I have placed it before the verb. Can you guess what the next one's going to look like? Nous le faisons. Were you able to guess that? The object pronoun is le, and I've placed it before the verb. So this is how it all comes together. But what exactly do these object pronouns mean? It's very simple. An object pronoun replaces the object of the sentence with the word it. We use it in English all the time. I just used it. I can't stop using it. That brings us to our next section of notes. So now you've got your four square notes. Let's go to the second square up at the top. Direct object pronouns. All right, this is object pronouns in general. Now we're going to talk about direct object pronouns, DOPs. There are 3 DOPs in French. The first one, you guessed it, le. Le is, of course, masculine, and it means him or it. What's the next one, class? La. You've got this figured out. La is feminine, and it means her or it, depending on what you're talking about. Now remember, in French, everything always has a gender, right? It's always going to be him or her, and even the its are either him or her. And then, of course, we have les, which is plural, and it means them. And them can refer to people or to things. So once again, what does that look like in a sentence? Well, if we're talking about people, you might ask the question, tu connais Paul? Do you know Paul? Paul is the object of the sentence because you are the subject. You know Paul. But it's a question. Do you know Paul? Tu connais Paul? And if you do, you say oui. Je le connais. We've replaced the word Paul with him. In English, I know him. Or here's another example. Tu connais Elise? Now this is a girl, and if you know her, you would say, oui, je la connais. But what if you don't know her? Very simple, you still make the sentence negative. Non, je ne la connais pas. There it is. We've replaced the name Elise with the word la. It means her. All right. Class, there's one more small section of notes, and that's going to be down in the lower left quadrant. So 4 square notes, let's do square number 3. These guys are called indirect object pronouns. So we had our DOPs up at the top, and now we have our IOPs. Indirect object pronouns. Well, what's the difference between a direct object and an indirect object? Let me give you some English examples. First of all, we have a sentence like this. I throw the ball. This has a very clear subject, I, a verb, throw, and an object, the ball. And I am directly throwing the ball because I take the ball in my hand and I throw it directly. The ball receives the action. The ball gets thrown. But here's an example of an indirect object. Same beginning. I throw the ball to Mark. What's the difference between these two sentences? Here, when you say I throw the ball is the direct object. It's directly thrown. But now I'm throwing the ball to Mark. Mark is still receiving some of the action because I'm throwing the ball to him. But this is the key word. I'm not throwing Mark. If I picked up Mark and I threw him, he'd be the direct object. But I'm throwing the ball to him, so he indirectly receives the verb. Do you see the difference? Mark is the indirect object because he kind of sort of gets verbed, but not 100%. He gets the verb through the ball, which is coming at him. So it's different than if I just threw him. It's indirect. So the same thing happens in French. If we have an indirect object, the indirect object pronouns, and there are only two of them, which is nice and easy, is going to be Louis and leur. Louis means to him or to her. Isn't that nice? Finally, there's something where we don't have to distinguish between masculine and feminine. It's both, to him or to her. And leur means to them. So basically, we're just talking about singular objects or plural objects. What does this look like in a sentence? Well, let me show you. Je téléphone à Claire. This is the difference between a direct object sentence and an indirect object sentence. It's the word to. Remember, Louis means to him. Leur means to them. I throw the ball to Mark. Class, what's the French word for to? Je téléphone à Claire. That means I'm going to say, je lui téléphone. Hon, hon, hon. Does that make sense? We'll do some more examples like this in class, but for now, those are the basics. We're going to be talking about what's the object of a sentence, how do you take that object and make it shorter, and where does it go? Before the verb. Voila, class. Get ready for some more practice with our direct and indirect object pronouns, starting the next time we meet. Merci beaucoup. À bientôt et au revoir.